when I think about mental strength, it's the willingness to do that uncomfortable thing.
My brother's girlfriend was over. It was like her first time having dinner with us, and I freaking took the loaf of bread and opened the back door and just chucked the bread out in the backyard. What is up, everybody? And welcome back to the Schooling Struggle Podcast. My name is Pete. I'm here with my friend and co-host Todd, and it is our belief that the only guarantee in life is that we are all going to struggle. And how we choose to embrace our struggles can lead us to become the best versions of ourselves. So in context with that conversation, I'd like to say hello to my friend Todd and get this thing rolling. What is up, Todd?
What is happening, Peter? Not much. There's not much happening over here in my area. Been doing some breath work. That's fun for me. Other than that, not much.
You go for like box breathing, or do you do a longer exhale than inhale? What's your basic premise here?
Yeah, I don't have a basic. I've been toying with a lot of different things. So for the last 3 weeks now, I've been doing yoga every morning, and there's a lot of different techniques in RAMOD. I don't know if you ever do RAMOD, but it's kind of a yoga that's attached to CrossFit-ish people.
RAMOD, for those of you out there that don't know what it is an app for your phone, range of motion, ROM, WOD, workout of the day. Yep. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you for clarifying. And in that, there's a bunch of different breathing that you do on various holds and for various durations. But after retouching on the breath book that we talked about weeks ago, and doing a little interesting investigation on my own, I've fallen in love with two things: apnea tables for diving, so static tables for CO2 and O2, as well as the Wim Hof breathing method, which I toyed with a long time ago, and it kind of scared me, but I kind of like it a lot. So I've been doing that to the point where, I'm getting high on my own supply. So that's pretty cool too. So yeah.
So in my front yard, I have a pond that is 8.5 feet deep at the deepest. And from what my students who are avid ice fishermen tell me is that I have at least 13 to 18 inches of ice on my pond right now. So if you want to come, we can find a chainsaw and cut a hole in the pond, and you could come stand in my pond and do some Wim Hof breathing if you'd like.
Okay, maybe. If this crazy guy shows up out of your front yard chopping holes in your eyes, you'd be like, wait a minute, I sent the invite.
Speaking of winter stuff, we as a family have been fully engaged in the Winter Olympics. We love watching it as a family. We set a standard early on after our daughter was born that screen time would be very, very limited. It's just the way that we've chosen to raise LJ. So she gets to watch a movie on Friday nights, and she gets a 20-minute show on Sunday, and that's it for the whole week. And to be able to watch 15 minutes of Olympics before bedtime each night is a really, really big deal for her, and it's a really fun way for us to bond. And I love every single event in the Winter Olympics. I'm just fascinated, and I'm totally one of those people that like tunes in for 3 weeks and is really, really into it, and then forgets about bobsled and luge and figure skating for 4 years, and then gets really, really into it again 4 years later. So that's what we've been up to.
If you had to pick a favorite event or sport of the Winter Olympics, what would it be?
Slope style skiing and snowboarding. Actually, I'm a snowboarder, but I love slope style skiing. And I also love the long cross-country events, both the biathlon and the skiathlon, where it's just watching the endurance and the will of human suffering to me is a really fascinating thing.
Awesome.
So actually I didn't even think about that, but that is a nice little segue into what I want to talk about tonight, which is a plethora of topics regarding mindset, mental strength, and what I've been hearing lately about what's called the hierarchy of mindset. And I think where we can launch the conversation is kind of the mindset version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So for those that aren't familiar, you can Google it, but essentially this guy Maslow back in the day said that our essential needs start from the bottom and go up. And it starts with our physiological needs, which is food, water, clothing, sleep, shelter, kind of the bare necessities for anyone's survival. And once those are squared away, we kind of move into our safety and our security. And once those are satisfied, moves into love and belonging, and eventually into esteem. And if you are able to square all those away in your life, you can kind of move on to self-actualization. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking and working on and reading about and learning about kind of the different aspects of mindset and how I can use the power of my mind to embrace, navigate, and manage the struggles that come my way. And I'm really excited and curious to know your thoughts about this. So Ben Bergeron, who is the main guy in the Chasing Excellence podcast that I referred to often, has shared in a number of episodes his what he calls the hierarchy of mindset. And basically it starts out with the very lowest form, or the first form is the victim mentality. So the victim mentality is a mindset that says, the world is against me, woe is me, these people are out to get me, the weather is out to get me, the world is out to get me, and there's nothing I can do about it. Then from the next step up from that would be what's called the pessimist. And the pessimist just kind of sees everything in a really negative light, might not be a victim of everything, but just doesn't see the positive in anything. And then the next step up from that would be the ever optimist, the person who only sees the roses and the Pollyanna style of life where everything is good, and the bad stuff we don't give any attention to and we don't even recognize. The next step up for that in the hierarchy would be the realist. And the realist has the ability to start to understand the difference between what this person has a control over and what they don't, and tries to be proactive with what it is that they do have control over. And then the final step from there would be what he calls is the curious. And the curious is willing to take on challenges, willing to strive in the face of adversity, even with the unknown, and is really embracing curiosity and courage to be the best versions of themselves, and kind of doesn't shy away from the obstacle. And in fact, kind of what our whole podcast is based around is embracing the obstacle. So I thought this to be a really, really fascinating topic. And I started to think about like where I might fall on that, or in certain situations, I might land in this level, in certain situations in that level. And I know that, just to kind of categorize ourselves or put ourselves into certain, holes or whatever it is that you want to call it is also, up for debate as well. But I just threw a ton at you, but I'm curious to know what your kind of immediate response is to that after hearing some of the stuff that I shared regarding the hierarchy of mindset.
Well, thanks for asking, Peter. That is a lot, but I'm used to this now, somewhat.
I only asked you, I threw a ton of information at you, but I only asked you one question, and that was my goal, never to stack questions.
Yeah, way to cloud that. Yeah, I mean, I agree with those things. I'm curious to know, and you kind of touched on it at the end there, but I'm curious to know, how does one gauge where they're at on a structure like this at any point in time?
That is a tremendous question that I absolutely do not have the answer to.
How would you do that for yourself? Like if you looked at those options and you said, yeah, today I'm at the realist stage, but sometimes I'm optimist. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, yeah, I don't think we're ever stagnant. I'm not just in one plane or one level of that at all times. But I can definitely see or gauge growth. Like an example of that would be during the time that I taught snowboarding full time. I was a full-time snowboard instructor for 5 years before becoming a teacher, and I was the most miserable human being to be around when it rained in the winter. Because when it rained in the winter, snow got destroyed. In Vermont, it always gets really, really cold after a rainstorm. So not only is the snow wrecked, but then the trails just become bulletproof, or what we used to call porcelain. And it was just solid ice for a very long time. And I was just a miserable human being to be around. And I was miserable if they were even predicting rain. And the weather is completely outside of my control, right? And something that I've really worked on is in the winter when they're calling for rain, not to let my mood, my attitude, my mindset be altered in any way. And I feel like I've overcome that. So, maybe I was the pessimist there, or maybe even kind of the victim mentality with that for a while. And now I feel like I'm more of a realist when it comes to that particular scenario. Like I don't let that get to me. I think another just really small example as I'm kind of combing through examples from my life is like road rage. Like if somebody gets upset with me on the road and gives me the middle finger, that used to really fire me up. And I felt like I needed to combat that with middle finger or a loud horn or show them that I was the right one. And now like I refuse to let that even get to me. And, obviously if I did something wrong, I need to learn from that and be a better driver and not cut people off. But the road rage thing other people's road rage doesn't get under my skin like it once did. So those are just some small examples where I feel like I've made some progress, but can I look you in the eye and tell you, well, in this scenario, I'm a pessimist, and in this scenario, I'm an optimist? I don't think so. I definitely find myself, feeling that victim mentality sometimes, and I definitely find myself on the very opposite end, feeling very curious and willing to take on risks to strive to be, a better version of myself.
That's a great answer. Yeah, I think for me, it's situational for sure. So in certain aspects of my day or my life, I guess. I remember one time I was going to work and I was talking to this girl I went to school with, and she was a social worker or something. And I was like, "Hey, do you know anything about like cognitive behavioral therapy?" And she's like, not really. I mean, I've heard of it, but whatever. And she's like, why? Like, what's going on? And I was like, well, I feel like when I'm on my way to work, I put on this different hat, and then I'm Todd at work, Todd, and then when I'm coming home, I try to lose that hat and I shake that off and I put on a different coat. And now I'm, welcome back home, Todd. But when I think about this hierarchy, and the way you look at it, I think that there's been times where I'm driving to work and, the same thing happens with road rage. And it's just like, how are you going to act given the circumstances or even the variables of that day? I think it's very hard to say where you're going to be for certain on any one of those. So if I think about Ben and I think about maybe how he's looking at this, it's more in the context of how you perform at the gym or how you perform physically. And I know that's probably not that narrow of a focus, but I start to think about where does that awareness come from on, like, I've had times where I go to the gym and I get very anxious because it's like, maybe I failed at this workout before and I know it's going to be the same thing. So I have these nerves. And so I might not be as curious to find out if I'm going to do any better than I am. I just want to be, sometimes I get to do it and I'm pessimistic. I'm like, this is going to suck. Right. So I think it's important to know the context of where we're talking about this in, and then to go back to our listeners or those we hope to empower and inspire. I think about how do you know when you are able to see and experience those different ends of the rung. So when I think about you in traffic or you with the porcelain, I think to myself, was there an emotion where you're like, oh man, it's like, like I can feel it in my gut. I'm just pissed, or like, like my brow furrows and I'm like, the rain's coming, or that guy, you know what I mean? So like, how do we begin to tease that apart a bit so we know what we're looking for, or if there's something that we can look for that then allows us to maybe jump to the next level or see that. I don't know. That's where my mind goes.
Yeah, I wonder if like certain triggers that you would feel in a given situation or scenario change over time. Like for me, I don't get the furrowed brow or the
Yeah.
really like deep frustration inside my feelings, if you will,
Yeah.
when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think if you were to ask me how would you gauge that, or how would you have someone gauge that within themselves, I think it might be like, you know, in the majority of the challenges that you're facing, where do you think you might find yourself? And obviously, the proprioception, or how we see ourselves, isn't always accurate, or is rarely accurate. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Right.
For me, right? What did I say in my 20s? I thought I was way cooler than I really was. I think that's probably still the case. I don't know. I'm not that cool.
You're pretty cool.
But I think, like, if I look back on my life or myself, I definitely in my teens felt like, if you were to ask me now, I think that looking back, I was in that victim mentality. Like, if I made a mistake, it wasn't my fault. It was my teammates' fault, or my boss's fault, or my teacher's fault, and those types of things. And now I feel like I'm able to take a little bit more ownership with those types of things. And I think, if you were to ask me, Pete, where are you on that hierarchy right now? Generally speaking, like, if I were to take an average of all of your actions or responses over the course of your day, week, month, or life, where are you right now? I, I would guess that I'm striving to be a realist. And I think what leads me to believe why I'm there is because I'm putting a lot of effort into trying to recognize in every scenario that I find myself in, what aspect of that scenario do I have control over and what do I not? And ultimately, what we have control over is our effort and our attitude. And our effort and attitude is just basically what produces our choices. So I'm in control of my choices, and knowing what I'm in control of, or trying to understand what I'm in control of, I think brings me more toward that realist. I definitely went through a phase in my life where I was like, oh, doesn't matter if anything's bad. We're just going to focus on the good, and we're going to be positive. And I used to embrace when somebody would say, hey, you're a really positive guy. But now I'd love for someone to look me in the eye and say, hey, you're real versus you're positive. And that's just something I'm working on.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that puts you a little closer to the curious talk part, because I heard you say a lot of like, I want to experiment with this. I really want to, try to be this way. And I think that's the curiosity piece. Is what drives you to do that, right? Is that curiosity. So if you're not there already,
Yeah.
I think you're approaching the curious. Not to say that you're tops, but I'm
Yeah, I
just
think the curious, there's probably flashes of it there. There's still a lot that I'm scared of. And I
yeah,
think the truly curious is less scared to try stuff than I am,
yeah.
if I'm being honest.
No, I mean, I think that everybody has that facet. I think we all will always have that. I mean, it's always scary, right? It's how do you approach, or do you approach, and then how do you approach at the same time?
For
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
long, I always thought that confidence was the foundation on which all our successes are built. And now I've really changed my tune on that. I really think it's courage, because I think confidence is the thought that you can attempt something with the knowledge that you're probably gonna, or there's a good chance that you're gonna be successful with that thing. But I think courage is willing to try something, having no idea what the outcome is going to be. And I think confidence, who knows where these two things fall in this hierarchy. But I think that there's a lot of areas in my life where I don't have courage, and I could summon a lot more courage than I do.
Yeah, I can relate to that. While I was researching, I found another. What are we going to call it? A scale of scale of things like around this. And the bottom is thoughts and words. So these are kind of resonate a little bit more to me based on our previous conversations. But so at the bottom you have thoughts and words. Then you have actions. On top of that you have habits, character, and at the top is destiny. So does that change how you look at that, or does it matter? Because they're all kind of a scale, right?
Can you please read those again to me?
Sure. At the bottom would be thoughts and words. Atop of that is actions. Then we have habits, character, and at the top is destiny.
I definitely think that our thoughts and words dictate our actions, and our actions dictate our habits. So I'm on board with the first three. Once it starts to get to the higher stuff, maybe because I'm not there, um, I don't know. But I would think, as we said, as at least as I shared in the last episode, that the sum of our habits makes up who we are, and who we are would be our character, right? So
Right.
by that methodology, yes. And then destiny, I have
Yeah,
no
right.
idea.
No, it's kind of ambiguous.
I recently received feedback about our podcast that when we bring up certain topics, it would be helpful for the listeners to define what it is that we're talking about. And I couldn't even tell you what the official definition of destiny is. Like, I have my own version of what I think it might be, and you might have your own version. If you have a moment to look it up real quick, I'd be curious to know what Google or Webster says about the official definition of destiny.
Yeah, give me a second.
You're a software engineer, right? You'd be able to Google this.
Destiny is the events that will necessarily happen to a particular person or thing in the future.
So they're saying that no matter what happens, those things will happen.
That's what this. That's let me look at Merriam-Webster says. The essential meaning of destiny is what happens in the future, the things that someone or something will experience, or a power that is believed to control what happens in one's future.
So I guess in that regard, you could say your thoughts and words, your actions, your character dictate what happens in the future. And I would say that that's not 100% of what dictates what happens in the future, but it definitely plays a major role in that. But I often get into conversations with people of what percentage of your life do you have control over? It's a really scary topic, but we can kick that can down the road later as we talk about destiny. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, bring us back on point. Sorry, I kind of got us out of there, but
yeah. So there's all different ways that we can think about our mindset, think about mental strength. What I'm teaching my students right now is the definition of mental strength is not anything what I once thought it was. What I thought mental strength was a couple of years ago is different than what I think it is now. And what I believe it to be now is the ability to understand the difference between what we have control over and what we don't. I think if we have the ability to do that, we are mentally strong. And as you know, I'm a big believer in reading the Daily Stoic, and it's just some kind of Stoic philosophy. And one that I read recently is something to the effect of strength is the ability. I'm reading this, so I'm not gonna pretend that I know it, but I jotted this down after I read it, and I think I jotted it down correctly. Anyway, strength is the ability to maintain a hold of oneself. It's being the person who never gets mad, who cannot be rattled, because they are in control of their passions rather than controlled by their passions. And that's kind of what I'm working on in my own life, and what I'm trying to share with my students right now is those of us who have the ability to recognize what we have control over and what we don't. is huge. And I think once we're able to decipher the difference of those two things, this is really easy to say and really challenging to do, to let go of what it is that we don't have control and be proactive with that of what we do. And it's crazy.
Those Stoics were smart. They had a lot of time on their hands to think about things like this.
Hearing Ben's hierarchy has really made me think quite a bit lately. Yeah,
it's pretty eloquent the way that fell out of your mouth, and it made me think about. I think maybe a modifier of that strength is being able to hold the ground where you see yourself fail in that. So, like, in certain situations that thing irritates you, right? But can you hold yourself back and not do that thing? I think that's maybe that's the test of the strength, perhaps. Like the awareness, I guess, is the first key. Like I can see this happening, and then what am I prepared to do about it? That's really the crux.
So I heard this recently. Awareness creates intention, and intention creates action.
Yeah.
So that first step has to be awareness.
Yeah.
For anything, I think. What about you?
Yeah, I think the same thing. Like I have to know that my cell phone is consuming my attention before I am able to do something about it or rise up above it, right?
And then the curious person is willing to spend time and energy trying to figure out the answer to the puzzle, which is we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if there's a puzzle to be solved, right? It might just be because some people using the cell phone, for example, I mean, you probably see this all day long at school, but in my industry, there are people who use the cell phone as a tool, and it's just a tool. Like, probably a lot of like social media influencers are the same way. Like, I use this thing for 45 minutes to create these things to get other people involved, and then I might not see that phone for the rest of the day. And then there's the people perhaps on the other side of that token who are like, oh, look at this thing that Peter did. I have to look at this. And then now I'm stuck in this loop, right? So I think you're right. It depends on the awareness. Like, I see it as a tool. You see it as whatever it is that you see it as, but it clearly isn't constructive in one way or the other. So I think that's interesting to think about.
One thing that's kind of struck me is how we can be curious in one facet of our life and what that rabbit hole leads to in other facets. So just from my life, I was really interested in competing in anything as a kid. I just found a lot of purpose in it, I guess. And as I grew older, I continued to love to compete. And when I decided I want to compete in physical feats, I started to look into what makes physical performance better than other physical performances. And I learned other aspects of the physiological makeup other than just training, which could be sleep, nutrition, mindset, those types of things. So then I started to kind of dive deeper into those things. And when it came to the mindset stuff, I learned that I was really mentally weak, not just with my competition, but with many aspects of my life. So that led me to the books that you and I have talked about, to these types of conversations. And just because I was interested in beating someone in a foot race, here I am 20 years later having conversations with you about the hierarchy of mindset.
Yeah.
And I was curious how I could be a better physical performer, but it led to many other things.
What was the wake up bell? Was there like one passage you read and you're like, wow, that I am weak. I need to do something about that?
No, not necessarily. Just when I look back at my life, like I realized how I acted. The difference between a response and a reaction is a response is a positive piece that, we can look back on and know that it was productive in some way, and a reaction is not. And I just spent many, many decades reacting. I guess some great stories of reactions.
Oh, I bet.
Still holes in the walls of my parents' house with posters hung up in front of them that I think my parents don't even know about still. I was like just getting into my understanding of what processed carbohydrates were. And my parents put bread on the table, as they did for like all these years. But because my mind had shifted on what I should and should not be eating, my brother's girlfriend was over. It was like her first time having dinner with us. And I freaking took the loaf of bread and opened the back door and just chucked the bread out in the backyard. And it's like, that was how I responded to that situation. And I have lots of reactions like that. So like, no. So when I look back, I was like, oh man, I really was a jackass. But, and I still am in many regards. I think looking back, I can see my progress versus there was no moment where I said, oh, aha, this is it. I think it's just little seeds and little nuggets along the way. This person taught me this and this book taught me that. And, What I tell my daughter all the time is the goal is to learn and apply, learn and apply, learn and apply. So that's what I'm trying to do right now, is just to learn and apply.
Sounds like it's working. Poor, poor loaf of bread.
So if I were to ask you, generally speaking, on that hierarchy of mindset, being the victim mentality, the pessimist, the optimist, the realist, and the curious, generally speaking, are you able to pinpoint where you might be, or is it just too erratic given the situation?
I think that I navigate that ladder or that pyramid in many ways during the day. I definitely do. I can see myself not so often thinking I'm the victim, but I definitely have a deep vein of pessimism. But like I said, it's contextual, so it really depends on where I'm at. I think I spend most of my time around the realist because I just feel like that resonates with me. But there's definitely times that I dip down into the lower rungs of that one for sure. So,
but a lot of the encouragement that you give me or the stuff that you share with me, I think reveals to me that you're curious in many ways and you're willing to. I mean, dude, you got like 1,900 things going on in your life at all the time. Like,
yeah,
you're curious.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm not curious, but
yeah,
but there it definitely switches for me, and I do my best to keep up where I can at the higher levels, but there are definitely moments of weakness throughout my day. I also think that with investigating strengths and character strengths and things like that, I know that some of them can be modifiers of the other one, right? So let's say you have one of these that's really low. Let's say victim in this case, but I mean, there's obviously a lot more character strengths. So like we were just talking about. So if I'm practicing being curious and realist at the same time, then the victim is less apt to get employed. Does that make sense? So like if I'm exercising actively one of those things, it's just like if you're in a bad mood and you go do 50 burpees, you're going to forget all about that thing because you're doing something that takes your mind off of there, and you're not as apt to sink back down. I think is kind of how I look at it. So if I'm able to keep those things active and current, and maybe that's partially why I do so many things, I know that it's not going to allow me to fall back down as easily. That's in my own head. That I think that's how that works. But
I was listening to something the other day, and they were talking about if you find yourself in a bad mood, the first thing you should do is go have a really small snack, because oftentimes when we're in a bad mood, it is when we are hungry. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, in your life, what role do you feel mental strength plays in you navigating and embracing your struggles?
Currently, and I think we've probably talked about this before, but I'll just throw it on the books. I allow my curiosity of my emotions drive me to things that I typically would not do before, or it might, like multiple times, it might get me closer. So if I feel like that pang in my gut, or I feel that lump in my throat, I can feel it right now. Like as I said that, I can feel it right now. It's that draws me to what it is that thing tells me that I should do. And so when I think about mental strength, it's the willingness to do that uncomfortable thing. That's how I employ it.
Yeah, I love that. On the flip side of that, I'm finding the role in my life. It's really interesting because the name Peter, it means of the rock or of the mountain. And I think one of the pieces of my life or the roles that I try to fill is to be the stabilizing force in other people's lives. And I love that people can confide in me and come to me and trust me to share with me the struggles that they're facing. And I often will put pressure on myself and say, dude, you need to be mentally strong. Like I'll say this to myself, like inside my head, and I'll like put pressure on myself to be mentally strong. And I don't know if
For other people,
if for myself, so that I can be like a rock or I can be a stabilizing force. Yes, so that I can be available to them, right?
Yeah.
We can't be available to other people unless we're available to ourselves first, right? As I say in sports, the number one ability is availability. So I'm not helpful for anybody else if I'm not first helpful to myself. So I got to square that away. But I put pressure on myself to be mentally strong for other people. And I think that that's almost like a sign of mental weakness. Because if I was just mentally strong, I wouldn't have to think about, dude, you got to be mentally strong here. I just would be. So I think that's a kind of an interesting conundrum as well.
Yeah, I think that can be dangerous.
Yes, that's exactly why I bring this up. Yes,
right.
100%.
Before you know it, you're like, oh, I have to hold all these people up, but I just found out that my weakness is way worse than what I'm displaying to those people potentially, right? So,
yeah, and that also is one, like if I have little cracks in the dam, if you will.
Yeah.
that I don't want to reveal those to anyone because I need to be the
Mm,
stabilizing force for these people, and that's tricky as well. But
interesting.
I seem to be navigating that okay
That's good.
lately. But
How
I
many,
definitely put pressure on myself to be mentally strong.
how many cracks you got in the dam that you're counting right now? Like if you think about, ooh, there's a couple. You got like one or two?
Specifically,
Yeah.
right
Like if
now,
you're like, I know that there's areas that I'm talking about in this microphone that I'm not coming out of these words. Like how many are there? Flaws, character flaws,
oh
those
God,
those
there's
those
countless
weaknesses. Yeah.
countless weaknesses and character flaws for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, absolutely, so many, and that's what I'm trying to work on. And then when it comes to those flaws, again, I keep coming back to the same thing. But this has kind of been the theme of my life for the last couple of years, or what I'm trying to make the theme of my life is: all right, of these character flaws, like what aspects of this can I control, and what aspects of this can I fix, and what aspects of this deserve my attention to try to fix right now. And just like we talked about a moment ago, is reacting versus responding. I still find myself reacting when my daughter frustrates me. Even tonight, it's just before I came down here, there's like 3 small examples that I can think of where my wife made fresh bread out of the oven. My daughter was so excited. She came running over. She's like, I have a piece of bread. I was like, no, the bread's for dinner. Like, I'm serving you dinner right now. Can you go wash your hands and sit in the seat? And she reaches over while I'm cutting, like under the knife to grab a piece of bread. And I said to her, do not reach under a knife. Like, you know much better than this. Please go sit down. I'm going to bring you your bread. She reached under the knife again for the second time, and I just flipped out. I was like, that's it. I'm
You
bringing your
didn't
mother
throw the bread
bread.
outside, did you?
I'm bringing your mother. I did not see. That's how I've gotten better. I did not throw the bread. Well, yeah, the windows are closed right now because it's -11
But you
outside.
wouldn't have thrown it. You wouldn't have thrown it.
But I did bring my wife bread, and I sat down with bread. And LJ starts crying. She's like, "How come I don't get bread?" I said, "Because neither of us reached underneath the knife, and you did." But
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah. That's good. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing, right? That's how I come unhinged in the same way with my family. Like it's so cliche, but you only hurt the ones you love. But it's those ones you just snap at so fast. I mean,
Oh, and then I
obviously,
beat myself up for
oh yeah.
reacting and not
Hmm.
responding. I'm like, oh, come on, you could have done so much better. And I know I'm going to have so many more opportunities to fix it because that's what
Yeah,
living in a family is. And
it's
I
hard.
don't come through for myself.
It's so
My
hard. Yeah.
father was a yeller, and I don't yell, so I feel like I've made steps forward there.
Good job.
She'll say like, "Stop yelling at me!" Like, dude, you have no idea what yelling is.
Right.
You, if you only knew.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
last piece,
Hmm.
and I read this also from Stoic philosophy, is that mental strength doesn't give way to anger and discontent. And such a person has strength, courage, and endurance, unlike the angry and the complaining. So, speaking of my family, one of the rules in our house is no whining, no complaining, no making excuses. And I think a good sign of that victim mentality is the consummate complainer. And that's something that I've worked really hard in my life, and I feel like I've made some good strides there. I don't think that I complain very often because I think often when we complain, it's just about things we don't have control over, and that's a sign of mental weakness. But I definitely put pressure on myself to be mentally strong at all times. But I like that the mental strength doesn't give way to anger and discontent, and such a person has strength, courage, and endurance, unlike the angry and the complaining.
Man, you're knocking it out of the park. I've had a couple aha moments just talking to you tonight. That's interesting. What did you just say about the complainer? Just complains about things that oftentimes they have no control over.
Yeah, I
Huh,
find that oftentimes
it's amazing.
people who complain are often complaining about things they don't have control over. Up here where I live in Vermont, dude, weather. So many people complain about the weather. And I know that's how people connect. Like you're waiting in line at the
Yeah.
post office or whatever, and it's so cold out today. It's so icy. Like that's how human beings connect is with negativity sometimes. But I want to try to rise above that and not be that.
Hmm.
And I often feel bad. Like people will try to connect with me by being negative, and I won't disrespect them in any way, but I'll just kind of talk about,
Something
um,
more positive.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's,
So, um,
yeah,
yeah,
thanks
it's
for sharing
tricky.
that. Yeah. I'm going to
Yeah.
put some thought on that one. That's a good
Awesome.
point. I always find myself
Awesome.
getting irritated about things that I cannot control over and over and over again. It's just like,
So when I do that, I just say to myself, dude, like you're mentally weak. Like you need to be better than this. And that's where I talk about putting pressure on myself, but in ways it's been helpful. So,
hmm, interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for sharing
Have
that.
you ever heard of the rubber band? So you put a rubber band on your wrist, and every time you complain, you have to switch it to the other wrist.
Oh, Nope.
and you start to recognize how often you complain. Now, it's more effective if you're doing it with other people who are around you so that they can recognize you're complaining and call you out on it. And then they can call, you can call
Yeah.
them out as well. And you start to recognize like how often you complain. The hard thing about really striving to be a non-complainer is you start to see how much people complain. And that's kind of hard sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But it's such a great thing to work on with high schoolers,
Hmm.
like, oh, Mr. D, it's so cold. They say, so you're trying to come in and tell me that you love when the weather's warm? They're like, yeah. So, all right, well, tell me that you love when the weather's warm,
Yeah,
So,
right.
because when we focus, whatever we focus on, that's what we bring our attention to, right? So that whole pyramid that you just brought up, our thoughts become our thoughts and words become our actions, and our words become our habits. So I'm thinking about how cold and miserable it is right now. That's bringing negative attention to my world.
Yeah.
And then that's what I'm seeing. Like, we see what we seek, and it's kind of a whole different conversation, but basically that negative mindset kept us alive as a species forever long. We had to be aware of the animal that was lurking in the woods, and we had to think the worst because that's how we survive. And now our world's kind of in a different place, and that negative mindset actually does not move us forward because now we're past survival and we're trying to thrive, right? That whole sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. I call it non-functional, functional thriving. Like, so in order to thrive now, that negative mindset really holds us back.
Yeah. Oh, wisdom from Pete.
I feel like I talked 97% of this episode, and you have amazing things to share.
It's fine. We'll each get our chance. I heard something one time on the way to work on a podcast, or it was an audiobook. I can't remember which one. And I actually had to pull over. It was so, I don't even know what the word, it just hit me out of nowhere. And it's so simple.
Profound.
It was profound, but I use that word a lot. What you do is what you get. And I was like, wow, like that makes sense in almost any circumstance you can put that in. It's like, yeah, that's what you get. Like, oh, I get irritated about this thing. Well, then everybody gets irritated at you. That's the life you're leading, because that's what you're attracting to you. Like, if you believe it in that way, it's very interesting. But
somebody once told me before I got married, what you see as lacking in your marriage is what you fail to bring to it.
Oh, see, it's exactly the same.
Yeah, I love that.
Oh, man, that's a tough one. Yeah.
Whew.
It's funny because it turns it right back around on you. You're like, oh.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Or the old saying, like, if you point a finger at someone, 4 fingers are pointing back at you. But it's really 3, because 3 are pointing back at you, and the thumb is kind of not really pointing at you. But
the thumb is not a finger anyway, so we could kick that one down the road too.
All right.
Yeah,
with that said, to all our listeners out there, we are so appreciative of your ears. We thank you for your time, and we're grateful for your attention. And we are out.
See ya.